the subject and not wander off the topic that I mean to discuss, which is to get the agreement of all honest and reasonable and decent people. Of course, the problem is that there aren't enough of these honest, reasonable and decent people, because when we start to discuss what is honest, we come up against disputed facts. And when we talk about logic, certain things are only logical if you believe in certain things, such as if you really believe in the afterlife, you would calibrate your behaviour towards getting to the better place. But if you don't, then you wouldn't. If you were decent, you would have certain principles, but these principles are not yet agreed on. Various people over the centuries have attempted to state a minimum of moral principles we ought to have, and we really should be grateful that Jews exist to do this and come up with the no-hide laws. But if you hate Jews, and many people do, in fact, my hypothesis, my suspicion is that the unofficial religion of the West is anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and this suggests that most Westerners are not honest or reasonable or moral, because they cannot agree on what is true, they cannot agree on, and because they cannot agree on what is true, they cannot agree on what is logical if what they believe is true. And they will certainly not be able to agree on what is decent if they hate Jews and Muslims who take a position against idolatry. Now, is idolatry actually forbidden and in fact evil? I would say it doesn't help. Thanks to Muslims, we have a more nuanced idea of idolatry. It's not just bowing before idols, as Jews would call it. It is, in fact, how shall I put it? Worshipping your own dumb opinions. So, in fact, it's not an actual idol. You don't, even if you're a narcissist and your psychologist has called you a narcissist, you don't actually have an idol of your own dumb opinions in your room that you regularly go and worship. It's just a figure of speech. It is the idea that you prefer your own opinion to anyone else's, you can't be reasoned with, and you prefer to believe in lies and nonsense in order to make your worship of your own dumb opinions logical to yourself. And because you suffer the cognitive dissonance of the people around you are disagreeing with your opinions, which are dumb, you you suffer cognitive dissonance, and you will hate the people who disagree with you and cause you to suffer cognitive dissonance. So you are easily tricked by flatterers. And that is why we really need a kind of common standard to keep us cohesive as a group. So we have to believe in certain things, such as the earth is round and goes round the sun. Because even though it doesn't really have that much political significance at the moment, the point is that what you choose to believe, in fact, measures your conformity with a group. What group, you will ask me? So I would have to say that groups are, well, it depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about your family, your associates, your colleagues, your friendship circle, your tribe, your community, your locality, your region, your country, your empire, your religion? So in all these questions we have to consider the bigger picture, other than what we like or dislike and whether it conforms to some local, national or international and global standard. And that is why we need an official moral system. And it is exasperating that after all these years of talking about an official moral system, nobody seems to get it. I suppose that they're just not able to understand abstract ideas like an official moral system. And I try to be helpful and say it means really either religion or secular political ideology. But nobody is interested in secular political ideologies, or they don't care to discuss it, or they're just not capable of discussing it because they don't exercise their minds in the way of moral reasoning. They're not academics, but I don't find that academics are able to discuss these things. Not even graduates in philosophy from a good university. And this is what I find really disturbing and infuriating. So why won't they discuss it? They should be able to understand it. I really do believe that a reasonably bright child would be able to understand what I'm saying. But I think the problem is that they are either Islamophobes or anti-Semites, and they labour under the misapprehension that God is either a Muslim man such as Muhammad or a Jewish man such as Jesus. And when they think of having to worship such a thing, their head explodes and they have to change the subject. So I have explained to them that anthropomorphism is idolatry. For those of you who don't know what anthropomorphism is, it means conceiving of God as a man, the way the Greeks and Romans would think of Jupiter, who is also Zeus, as a man with a white beard, who has a wife called Hera, who has a daughter called Aphrodite. This is anthropomorphism, conceiving of God as in some way being human. It is not allowed if you are to worship the Abrahamic God properly. So I keep telling these anti-Semites and Islamophobes that God is not human. Therefore, he cannot be a man, and therefore he cannot be either Jewish or Gentile, or male or female. But for some reason, these simple instructions are ignored or not understood. And then, I suppose, the person that I'm talking to who isn't sure if he believes in God or not, if he's liberal or conservative or nationalist, they have to change the subject. And I'm not even talking about Zoomers who have had less of an education than people of my generation. I'm actually talking about people who might even be older than me. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that a lot of people don't know what's good for them, and even when you try to explain it to them in the simplest terms, repeatedly, loudly, they just don't get it. And that, I suppose, is why therapy is necessary, because there are some people who will have difficulty in understanding the simple things that you're saying to them because their minds are a mess. They are not thinking logically. They have no convictions. But how are we to have convictions? It means to feel sure of something. But for the person who doesn't believe in God, who doesn't understand theology, they can only be sure when they feel the emotions of hatred or love. And as we all know, our moods can change. So it is a problem for many people accepting that they do need a religion, even if they are dissidents, such as, if you're a majority Catholic country, then your minority would be Protestants, or vice versa. But I would have thought that the no-hype laws would be pretty uncontroversial to everyone, apart from the first two, which are an echo of the first and second commandments for forbidding idolatry and blasphemy. I am not proposing to force anyone to change their views, just challenge the logic of their thinking. Now, I don't think anyone can deny that the Abrahamic God is the most powerful God conceivable, or that the Abrahamic religions of Christianity and Islam have the biggest expanse of territory, consisting of supposedly Christian and Muslim nations, even if they're not all theocracies. In fact, the West has no theocracy at all. The Vatican, officially a theocracy, doesn't really count. And in any case, it submits to the liberal order in the same way that the Anglican Church submits to the liberal order. So really, the religion of the West is liberal values. But these values have not been defined. And when you push the liberal into defining it, well, he won't be able to, because it hasn't previously been defined. They might say, though, that it's the First Amendment, They might even argue that liberalism is really liberation from living under a totalitarian Christian monarch. And it began with the American Revolution and continued with the French Revolution, and the last Republican Revolution was in Russia when the Russians exterminated their entire royal family. So it keeps getting worse, but there is still a monarchy in existence in the West, the British monarchy, and it is through the British monarchy that Australia, Canada, New Zealand are united with Britain. And so we should acknowledge that the British Empire still exists, though it dares not speak its name and instead calls itself the British Commonwealth, though you will be able to find on the website of the chief rabbi of the British Commonwealth that there are references to imperial Jewry. And once upon a time, Britain did have a global empire, which it lost after picking 2 fights with the Germans. So now, Europe is an occupied country, occupied by the Americans. America is currently in a state of political uncertainty. Americans are angry and disappointed with Trump for being such a Zionist. Nick Fuentes is a rising star in being the Pope of anti-Semitism. He is an excellent communicator and has eclipsed E. Michael Jones. Whom the younger generation call a boomer, meaning that you're old, you're not going to be around for much longer, you talk in a way that we dislike and do not understand and will ignore you. E. Michael Jones is an eloquent speaker. I think Jews are still afraid of him. The smart ones are. The stupid ones think they can somehow persuade him, and they do not know. They have not analysed properly his methods, and his method is, well, obviously anti-Semitic in the sense that he refuses to distinguish between righteous and unrighteous Jews. He lumps them all together. He focuses on the behaviour of secular liberal Jews and says that they represent all of Jewry. How are we to decide whether liberal or ultra-Orthodox Jews should represent Jewry? One could argue that there are far more Jews who are secular and liberal and assimilated than Jews who are practicing and foreign and people that Gentiles never talk to. And I would say that there is a very logical way of doing it. I mean, if you're going to talk about Catholics, which E. Michael Jones and Nick Fuentes are, then you'd have to say that the Pope represents Catholicism because he is the leader, the supreme leader of Catholicism. And it would be unfair to choose criminal Catholic or the mafia even and say the mafia represent Catholicism. It would be just as unfair. Or you could, if you want to be anti-American, you could just choose the worst American you can think of. Some people might say Trump, but I would suggest somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer or any convicted criminal. Tyler Robinson, perhaps, and say all Americans are like Tyler Robinson. So we have to distinguish between people who represent the lawgivers of the group and the lawbreakers of the group. So Tyler Robinson cannot be considered to be a decent and respectable American, while perhaps Trump, because he's president, is arguably the supreme American until somebody else takes over. And so it wouldn't be fair to say Muslims are terrorists without referring to their leader. So Imam Khomeini, who is supreme leader of Iran, would represent Shia Muslims. But who represents Sunni Muslims? If you asked Sunni Muslims such a thing, they wouldn't be able to say. And if you asked Jews who represents them, they actually wouldn't be able to arrive at any kind of consensus. Yes, of course, you can say that the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, is leader of the Jews. But if he only takes orders from Washington, then he is but the Governor General of the American Empire. And religious Jews might say, we're certainly not going to be bowing to the authority of any heretical Jews. So let us say that the leader of Jews should be a rabbi, at least. He must be a rabbi, and then he must be supreme rabbi. But who is to be the supreme rabbi? It would have to be a rabbi who represents ultra-Orthodox Judaism, who speaks English. I really don't think you can get away with, say, some non-English speaking rabbi whom nobody has heard of. It has to be an English speaking rabbi, known to Westerners, and I can only think of Yaron Reuven and Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi. And possibly Rabbi Tovia Singer, who is the expert in the New Testament and is always showing us how he has debunked Christianity. So out of the three, one of them should be chosen as supreme rabbi of the Jews. Two of them, actually only Rabbi Yaron Reuven actually lives in Florida, in Miami, I believe, and Rabbi Mizrahi has family in Israel, but I think he spends more time in America than he does in Israel. And Rabbi Tovi Singer actually lives in Israel. So I guess you kind of have to satisfy a residency requirement to say you represent Jews. You have to at least live in Israel. There is also Rabbi David Bar Hayim, who has quite a few interesting ideas. I've just viewed one of his old videos about how do we know God exists, which is really what inspired this stream. His manner towards Gentiles is openly contemptuous, but that's fair enough. He doesn't want to talk to me, but I think out of all the rabbis, he would be, I suppose, the most prestigious one in that he just has this manner, the scornful, looking down his nose at you, that you are such a worm of a Gentile. But he I know he has a following, and he does have interesting ideas, and so, and he, not only about Gentiles, but about Judaism too. And what he said in this, I think, video 7 years ago was that it is in fact logical to believe in God, because the universe didn't just come into being by itself. And then he mentioned the Big Bang, and he said it was illogical. The idea of a singularity is illogical, but then if the Quran mentioned a singularity and describes the Big Bang, then who are we to argue against Abrahamic God? I'm just going to find. Okay, I can't remember the verse that's in the Quran that talks about the universe beginning as a singularity, but I'm sure you'll be able to find it yourself. So, because Rabbi David Bar Hayim, I'm sure, has religious reasons for not reading the Quran, so he hasn't read it, so he's not aware of this verse. And we know from his videos how much he hates Muslims, to the extent that he calls them Islamofascists. Which I think is frankly rather childish. I mean, it adopts the liberal practice of calling anyone you don't like a fascist. And what is fascism but a desire for national unity? And fascism was once upon a time considered a proper and decent thing to be, particularly in fascist Italy. I do not see why the desire for national unity to be necessarily a bad thing. We seek social cohesion. We all live in countries and being governed by government. So I certainly see the logic of wanting social cohesion and national unity, or nothing will be done and civil war would be the rule. Fascism has a symbol called the fasces, which is a bundle of sticks tied by a string, and these symbols of fascism can be seen everywhere in American public architecture, certainly in at the Lincoln Memorial and the statue of George Washington. So I see nothing wrong in desiring, acquiring and maintaining national unity, and what we can surely agree on is that something ideological is necessary for us to obtain this social harmony, social cohesion and national unity that we want to deal with our external and internal enemies. We must thus begin to deal with the enemy within, and the enemy within is, of course, wrongthink. If we conceive of the world incorrectly, then we are going to go wrong, and if our practice when we go wrong is to scapegoat someone, then we are compounding our errors and capacity for disaster, are we not? This is particularly regrettable in peoples who are supposed to believe in the Abrahamic God, because it is really a very simple system of problem solving. So the idea is that you have a book of rules and you think it comes from God, and you believe that God punishes evil and rewards good in this life or the next. So if you're suffering, then it must be punishment for your sins. And if you've done nothing wrong, then you're just being tested to qualify you to get to the better place in the afterlife. So what's the problem? Why are people simply unable to even entertain this idea? So I was trying to put this to this friend of mine whom I've known for a long time. So he will be saying on some days that he believes in God, on some days that he is agnostic, and on other days that he is a militant atheist. And worst of all, he cannot even bring himself to take theology seriously. And I thought, well, it's just you and me talking. I can understand that maybe you don't want to be seen to be talking to be taking theology seriously by your atheist associates and friends, but it's just me and you talking. Why can't you entertain the idea, a hypothetical situation where God might exist and you might believe in God? Why can't you even entertain it? And he just couldn't. He literally could not do it. I know that not everyone is an alpha male. The sign of a beta male is someone who looks around him when you ask him a question to look for guidance about what position it is safe for him to take. He obviously doesn't want to stick his neck out and, say the wrong thing. But what if you are certain? What if you are certain that it is in fact the correct and logical thing? Because all I did was, if God exists to punish idolatry, then Christians would be in deep trouble, wouldn't they? It's all hypothetical. I'm not claiming God exists. But why is it so conceptually impossible for him to even entertain the idea? So I concluded that it must be fear of breaching the taboo of questioning questioning liberalism, because it is in fact a religion, right? And liberalism officially allows Jews, Muslims and Christians to exist and live amongst them, but you're going to be in trouble if you take it literally. That's the whole thing. I think I have finally arrived at the cause of the whole thing, that there is this kind of cringe, like I can't be seen to be taking this thing seriously. What will people think of me if I, even for a moment, entertained the idea that God might exist to punish evil? I can almost see all these atheist brains squirming at the horror of it. But I think somebody has to put the situation to these people who are unable to entertain this idea even for a moment, while they claim to be educated and enlightened and supporters of free speech. They actually cannot bring themselves to conceive of such a situation, let alone think of ways of operating as a society within it. But then they cannot deny that Jews are regarded as the world's most ancient and powerful race. Just because they still exist, and just because all these Christians and all these Jews, by complaining about them and claiming to be the eternal victims of Jews, they themselves raise Jews above themselves. But they don't see this, because they don't want to, because what is sacred to these anti-Semites and Islamophobes is that their anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. So when I say to people who hate Jews that really Jews are rather credulous people who are easily led by cunning imperialists, they cannot accept it. They have to think that Jews are super cunning, supernatural, and always tricking them and making them suffer. But I do not want to be a Jew. I do not envy them, so I certainly don't envy them. Everyone knowing their business, trying to engage them in some trolling debate about Zionism and Judaism. I'd rather do without that. And of course, even if you explained everything perfectly well, you would be accused of lying, or be contradicted by other Jews, because there is no supreme rabbi to say that his word on matters of doctrine is the final word. They are a bunch of leaderless people, as leaderless as Sunni Muslims, who cannot even get accountable leadership from a political leader that they do not have, and do not even think to themselves to get one, because I guess they're all looking to the Americans to solve their problems. So we go back to Uncle Sam, represented currently by Donald Trump. Because of his inconsistent messages, his apparently mad posts on Truth Social, we can only guess at the state of his mind and what he is planning. He is also called Zion Don. And I suppose he could easily argue, I suppose, that I never said anything that would make anyone think that I was anti-Zionist, and besides, he probably has some idea of a Trump Tower being built in Gaza or something. So the West is in turmoil because America is in turmoil. But I can help by suggesting that Americans get themselves a religion, or at least a legal system that is derived from a holy book dedicated, well, supposedly from the Abrahamic God, that gave them the First Amendment. I mean, of course, the Quran, chapter 2, verse 256 of the Quran supports the First Amendment. So it's a great shame that no one is able to sustain a conversation long enough for me to reach this point. I'm currently talking to a bunch of Americans who are being nannied by a Jew who wants to protect the feelings of his Christian associates. He obviously doesn't agree with me about giving it to them good and hard, right between the eyes, that Christianity is idolatry. But somebody has to do it. Because Christianity is the problem. And it is a problem because it is the religion of hypocrites who are only interested in apparently following the religion of mum and dad because they don't want any trouble from their family or mum and dad, who might disinherit them if they choose to convert to another religion. However, the point is this: if you really believed in God, then you would have to avoid idolatry to increase your chances of getting to the better place in the afterlife. And if you believe in neither, then I really don't see how you are going to solve your this life problems in your society and country. And it would help if these confused and frightened white men felt able to think for themselves and not wish to always avoid engagement because I guess they already know they can't win the argument. And sadly for a lot of Jews, they can't win the argument against me either, which is why I'm always kept at arm's length and never allowed really to make my point. But I think they already know the point I am making, and they can't quite bear to think about it.